Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Lots to get to this evening. Philadelphia abortion doctor Kermit Gosnell is being charged with 4 counts of infanticide. But following a 6-month investigation undercover at abortion clinics, a pro-life group, Live Action, contends that Gosnell is not alone. Live Action President LILA ROSE will share her findings and respond to criticisms about her methods. And later, where have the male role models gone? Author, columnist, and radio personality Eric Mataxas is here to discuss manhood and his latest book, 7 Men and the Secret of Their Greatness. He's chosen some good ones. As always, you are invited to weigh in on everything you see tonight. Drop us an email at worldover@EWTN.com now. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. An historic first for the Catholic Church. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI returned to the Vatican on Thursday, moving into his new home at a renovated monastery inside the Vatican Gardens. The occasion marks the first time that a reigning pope and a former pope have lived within the Vatican simultaneously. Pope Francis resides in the Santa Marta guest house, very near the Vatican Gardens. The Holy Father welcomed his predecessor upon his arrival at the new residence. The Vatican offered no video or photos of Benedict's return. Spokesman Father Federico Lombardi said the two popes shared a brief moment of prayer at the chapel inside Benedict's new home. According to journalists present for the homecoming, the former pope appeared much frailer than his last public sighting. However, Father Lombardi insisted that the pope isn't suffering from any specific ailment and is an elderly man weakened by age. And a papal visit to the Holy Land could be in the offing. During a visit to the Apostolic Palace on Tuesday, Israeli President Shimon Peres invited Pope Francis to the Holy Land. The Vatican said the pontiff accepted the invitation with willingness and joy. A date has not been set. The Vatican described the meeting between Francis and Peres as cordial. The two leaders discussed Syria, Israeli-Palestinian relations, as well as the decades-long negotiations concerning the taxation of church property in the Holy Land. On Tuesday, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration announced it will again expand minors' access to the morning-after pill. In 2009, the emergency contraceptive Plan B was made available to 17-year-olds without a prescription at pharmacy counters. Now, pharmacies are to make the morning-after pill available on store shelves to anybody 15 or older. The FDA change comes after a New York judge ruled that limiting access to Plan B to those 17 and older was arbitrary and capricious and thus illegal. The contraceptive, the judge said, should be available to everyone. On Wednesday, the Justice Department announced it was challenging the court ruling. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom has nearly doubled its list of countries considered world's worst offenders of religious freedom. In its latest annual report, the independent federal agency recommends that the State Department designate 15 nations as countries of particular concern, based on what it calls systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom. 8 nations: Burma, China, Eritrea, Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Uzbekistan are currently designated as countries of particular concern. The Commission recommends 7 others be added: Egypt, Iraq, Nigeria, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Vietnam. Back in the U.S., labor unions now appear to be firmly behind the immigration reform effort. Union members paraded and danced side by side with immigrant rights activists in cities across America. In May Day rallies on Tuesday, the demonstrators urged legal status for the 11 million-plus undocumented immigrants already in the U.S. This year's May Day crowds paled in comparison to those of years past, when demonstrators numbered in the tens of thousands. The Senate will pick up a comprehensive immigration reform bill when it returns from break next week. Rhode Island made it official this week. Governor Lincoln Chafee signed a same-sex marriage bill into law on Thursday. Rhode Island joins 9 other states and the District of Columbia in allowing gay couples to marry. The other 5 New England states already have gay marriage laws. The first weddings could occur August 1st when the new law takes effect. In Scotland, the Herald is reporting that all bishop appointments are on hold, while the Vatican more fully assesses the state of the church there and concerns about alleged sexual misconduct. Archbishop Philip Tartaglia of Glasgow was informed of the decision this past week in a meeting with Cardinal Mark Willett. The cardinal heads the Vatican congregation responsible for the vetting of potential bishop candidates. Amid scandal in February, Scotland's top prelate, Cardinal Keith O'Brien, resigned his post as Archbishop of St. Andrews and Edinburgh, following accusations that he made sexual advances towards several priests. According to the Herald, the Congregation for Bishops has instructed the papal nuncio in the UK to continue gathering evidence on Cardinal O'Brien. It is also seeking information about sexual bullying and open relationships in seminaries, as alleged in a recent book by a Scottish priest. 5 of Scotland's 8 dioceses are either vacant or occupied by bishops serving past the customary retirement age of 75. And finally, Bishop Joseph McFadden of Harrisburg, Philadelphia, died unexpectedly on Thursday morning. He was 65. Bishop McFadden was attending a meeting of the Catholic bishops of Pennsylvania. While staying at a Philadelphia rectory, he awoke feeling ill and was taken to the hospital. He was pronounced dead at approximately 7:40 a.m. A cause of death has not been announced. Bishop McFadden was appointed Bishop of Harrisburg in June of 2010 by Pope Benedict. May Bishop McFadden rest in peace. When we return, pro-life activist and president of Live Action, LILA ROSE, made headlines this week for undercover reports her organization conducted at abortion clinics. She claims they confirm that Dr. Kermit Gosnell is not the only abortionist engaging in infanticide. We'll let you be the judge when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My first guest is founder and president of Live Action, a group that made national headlines this week. Following a 6-month investigation of abortion clinics around the country, LILA ROSE, the president of Live Action, contends that Philadelphia Dr. Kermit Gosnell is not the only abortion doctor willing to commit infanticide. LILA ROSE is here to defend her investigative methods and share some new undercover video. LILA ROSE, welcome to the program. Let's talk about why you went into these clinics. And this was all over the country. What happened?
Sure. Well, first of all, we have Kermit Gosnell making headlines, as he should, more and more because of the atrocities committed in his Philadelphia clinic. But Gosnell is not alone, and that's why we're doing this investigation, to demonstrate, and for the last 6 months, we've been documenting the inhuman and abusive practices in the abortion industry at large. So you're looking at a couple things here. First of all, the brutality of the abortion procedure. Most people don't realize what abortion really does to a baby. How in these, the different late-term procedures, they're severing the umbilical cord of these babies so they asphyxiate to death, or you're going to, rip them apart piece by piece to get them out of the woman, or you're injecting poison into the chest cavity of the child, into their heart, to stop its little beating heart. I mean, it's almost, it's so difficult to even say these things, but this is what's happening legally in our country. So there's that issue, and then there's the issue of infanticide, the killing of these same babies if they make it out of the womb alive.
And we're talking about 23 weeks gestation.
23 to 26. Our investigators for this project were 23 to 26 weeks pregnant. So these children are all old enough to survive outside the womb.
And we should say Gosnell is charged with 4 charges now of murder, of infanticide, and there's substantive evidence that, in fact, you've got a number of his co-conspirators who have already admitted to murder. in these cases.
And keep in mind, there are complaints, but that clinic was not investigated for 15+ years. So who knows the other abuses that went on there we don't even know about. But Gosnell is just the tip of the iceberg. We have a vast, unregulated, self-regulated abortion industry in this country that enjoys the protection of the president, of Planned Parenthood, of all these groups, and they're killing children in the womb and outside of the womb.
Let's talk for a moment, and I want to share with the audience some of the video you brought along. This first clip is the newest clip. It's from Arizona. This is an abortion clinic in Arizona. Tell us what happened. Set the stage for us.
Sure.
Who is this talking to this Dr. Laura Mercer and Nurse Linda?
This is a National Abortion Federation clinic in Phoenix, and you're going to see two encounters, one with the Dr. Laura Mercer, an abortionist there in training, and another one who is a nurse. And this clinic, first of all, Dr. Laura explains the experience of the abortion for the child. She says how, they inject the poison into the baby's heart. She talks about how the woman should not call the hospital because if she goes into labor accidentally, the hospital might help her deliver the baby. So she should instead come to there because they'll take care of it at the clinic, implying that they'll ensure that the baby does not survive.
Okay, we're going to play a clip. Watch this.
Step 2 is that we do the injection, which is a quick poke through your belly, and that stops the fetal heart, so that makes it so if you were to deliver, there shouldn't be movement, there shouldn't be any of those things.
Okay. So it's almost like we're guaranteed it's like we're okay.
We induce a demise, an intrauterine demise.
What does demise mean?
Death.
So if they use the suction, then there's possible movement when it comes out.
Yeah, and sometimes
Is it alive or?
Sometimes they are, yeah. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it will come out whole, because they use suction, because they use instruments, and sometimes the fetuses don't come out, that's not complete.
Okay.
So,
but if it does come out whole, I mean, will they resuscitate it? Like, will I have to take care of it? Okay. If that does happen, like if they do it, if I were to choose to do it that way, like, you would just let it go, right? Okay, so you would just let it die on its own if it was whole and breathing. Yes?
They do not resuscitate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just let it die on its own and, okay.
And that video was produced by Live Action. Lila Rose is the president. Your reaction to that, and what are people to read into what they heard?
Sure. Well, it's heartbreaking. The doctor, first the abortionist and the nurse, is saying basically that they would not resuscitate if the child came out alive. And even if the child didn't make it out alive, they're talking about how they either inject poison into that baby's heart or in the moving out process, ripping that a baby. Sometimes the nurse says it doesn't come out whole because they're taking this a baby. We're talking about a 24-week-old infant, and this is how they're killing the child. So the takeaway is, what have we come to in our country where we're allowing this brutality to continue? How can we be, pride ourselves on being a world leader and being a civilized nation when we're allowing these incredible, inhuman practices that we wouldn't even subject kittens or dogs to?
Now, some of these clinics have responded to you, and they've said, look, this is legal. This is on the books, Lila Rose. Your problem is with the law, not with us. This is what the law allows.
Well, thankfully, there are some laws against infanticide, and the Federal Born Alive Infants Protection Act, which does protect children that survive abortion attempts. So, yeah, it is legal to kill that same child in the womb, and we need to change that. But it isn't illegal, thankfully, to kill that child outside of the womb. And in these clinics, you have admissions of guilt saying that they would do this. To be honest, they have done this, and this is the way that they would treat survivors of abortions in their clinics.
Now, some of your critics this week have said questions like the ones we just heard are hypotheticals. They're not actual evidence of any sort, and they question your methods here. What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I think that absolutely we need to have a police investigation. We need to have the U.S. Attorney General's office start investigating, because this is a federal Born Alive Infants Protection Act. So, you need to follow up and have U.S. officials do their job here to ensure that these victims are going to be protected and they get the justice that they deserve. We're journalists. We're demonstrating that there seems to be corporate knowledge in this abusive industry of how to practice brutal late-term abortions and what to do to the survivors of of those abortions. So that's what I would say to any critics. I would say, absolutely, we're journalists. You know, we're not detectives. We don't have the power to go in and subpoena records. You know, in one sense, I wish that we did, because then we could actually get more of this evidence out to the public. But that's up for the government to do. That's where we need to sign the petition, liveaction.org, calling on U.S. authorities to do their job and ensure that justice is served here.
Okay, I want to show another clip, but before I do so, you all also went to a D.C. Abortion clinic. You spoke to a Dr. Cesar Santangelo. What did you find there?
The D.C. clinic is so disturbing, Raymond, because, you know, and I was actually just there today meeting with the board of directors, trying to urge them to ensure that this doctor, so-called doctor, no longer is practicing there, because our 24-week-old investigator walked in and first was told how, in graphic detail, how her baby would be killed in utero, but if after the labor was induced, the baby happened to come out alive, because this does happen. These are 2 to 3 day procedures. They're inducing labor. If her little baby would come out alive, Cesar Santangelo says, legally, I'm required to help it. He understood that, but he said, I would not help it. He told her he would let it die in his clinic, let this child die in his clinic.
Now,
this is blocks from the White House.
He's contesting that, and he's saying, look, I was engaging in a private conversation with my patient. This is not evidence of any sort.
There's no privacy when you're talking about killing children. This needs to be exposed for everyone to see, and U.S. attorneys need to get involved, because there's a federal crime here potentially, and district attorney, you know, here in D.C., the police department and the health department need to get involved. So again, we're investigative journalists. We're providing this evidence that suggests that there's criminal activity going on, but this is where the officials need to get involved, like they did in the Kermit Gosnell case, to ensure that justice is served.
And what all of this has brought to the foreground, both the Gosnell trial as well as many of these videos, the distinction, the legal distinction between what is legal and illegal. Basically, whether you take the child's life in the womb or outside, that is the demarcation of legality. And it's
such a blurry area, Raymond, because that same child minutes earlier can be brutalized to death in the womb, but thankfully is still protected outside of the womb. That's the schizophrenia of our society.
Yeah, same child, just different location.
Same child, in one side of the hospital, you know, care for the preemie to survive. The other side of the hospital, ripping that child limb from limb. This is what we've allowed to happen in our country.
This is a Bronx clinic you went into. Explain briefly, give us the setup here, and then we'll let people see.
So Bronx is very disturbing, and again, the abortion rate in New York City is 40%. So almost half of these children are aborted, and it's skyrocket abortion rates. In the Bronx, you see they're talking to the intake counselor or the clinic worker, and she's basically telling our investigator that if the child survived the abortion attempt, or if it came out, they would put it in a jar of toxic solution. Our investigator says, well, what if it's moving? What happens? She says it will stop in the jar. It can't breathe in the jar, indicating that it would be drowning in toxins. This 23, 24-week-old baby killing this child this way in the clinic.
Here's the clip from that Bronx clinic live actions video.
If it did come out in one piece, it's very small.
Oh, okay.
So they would still have to put it in a jar container with solution and send it to the lab.
Oh, okay. So they would just be able to just do it.
Yeah, all our specimens have to go out to the lab.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no matter what.
That's just how you get rid of it? Like, that's just how you get rid of it, whatever?
Garbage.
Yeah. Like, what if it was, like, twitching or, like, something like that? Like...
The solution will make it stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not going to be moving around in the jar.
Okay, the solution would make it, like...
Yeah, that's the whole purpose of the solution.
Okay. So, like, if it looked like it was, like breathing or something like that?
It'll automatically stop. It won't be able to.
It won't be able... Okay.
It's terrifying stuff. Now, some have said, Lila Rose, that video like that, by sending someone posing as a pregnant woman,
she's not
I know
posing.
she's indeed
she's pregnant.
but
she's a brave woman,
but she had no intention of having an abortion, and that live action is setting up a situation that is nothing more than entrapment. You say what?
We're absolutely setting up a situation, but these are situations that these clinicians and these abortionists deal with every day. There are over 50 late-term abortions every day in our country. And those are statistics coming from Guttmacher and the abortion arm of Planned Parenthood. There are over 1 million abortions in our country every year. This happens every day, and we can put our head in the ground and pretend it doesn't happen, but it does. And we need to know the truth about how it's happening, and then we need to expose it, and we need to stop it.
Mark Shea wrote this week in a blog entry that this is lying for Jesus, that you're engaging in lies for an end that you consider good. You'd respond how?
I would say that they're acting. I mean, we're intending to fully disclose the identity as far as these aren't actually there for the abortion procedure to as many people as possible in the end. We're doing what, networks like NBC and Dateline have been doing for years, investigative journalism with the CIA, the FBI practice for years. Some of our, people I really respect and admire, people of strong faith, have been doing investigative work, undercover work for years. We're taking on responsibility for these crimes in this way to do this work when government has failed us. Well, and this is where we're calling on the government to act and to do what they're supposed to do to protect these children.
Yeah, a couple of journalists and I were talking about this week, and they took umbrage with your report, frankly, and said, this is entrapment, you're setting people up. I said, how is this substantively different from To Catch a Predator, NBC's landmark series that continues today? And look, you're taking these guys, it's working with law enforcement to take these predators off the street. Isn't that a good thing?
It's a very good thing. So the double standards are there, but that's because people are trying to deflect from this horror that they don't want to look at, because we like to think, oh, we're going to be okay, America's, we've got problems, but we're doing good. This killing is happening blocks from the White House, and this is what we're allowing. We've got to put a stop to this, and people don't want to face it.
When I mentioned to the journalist friends, one of them said, no, wait a minute, we're journalists. Lila Rose is an activist, and she said so. What would you say to that?
I'm an activist, journalist, advocacy group, absolutely. And I would encourage journalists. These are hot stories. There's a whole self-regulated abortion industry committing crimes, hurting women and children. This is journalism crazy. Come at these stories. Go get them. We're doing this because the truth needs to get out there, and people deserve to know it. Women deserve to know this. Our government officials need to be urged into action here. That's why we're doing this. But I would urge, other journalists, take it on. Bring it on. Investigative journalism is there's a proud heritage of it. So, walk forward in in those that have gone in the past, like Upton Sinclair, who went undercover into the meatpacking industry. Go do this work yourselves, I would say. Absolutely. We need more journalists on this topic.
Lila Rose, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Raymond.
You can find out more about Live Action and Lila Rose at liveaction.org. When we return, the Magnificent Seven, sort of. Eric Mataxas joins us to talk about 7 men everybody can look up to when the world of her life continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My next guest is a New York Times best-selling author of biographies on William Wilberforce and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's also a radio commentator for Breakpoint with over 8 million listeners on 1,400 stations. He's here tonight to talk about the importance of male role models and the apparent lack of them today. He's written a book on the subject called 7 Men and the Secret of Their Greatness. Would you welcome Eric Mataxas, who joins us via satellite from Florida. Eric, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk for a moment about this book, which really is a meditation on manhood. Why were you moved to write this book at this moment?
Well, it seems pretty obvious. Most thinking people know that there's a crisis of manhood in our culture. Think about 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago. If you said, be a man, people had a sense of what it meant to be a man. Today, because of, our sort of politically correct culture, we don't really even talk about that. What is a man? How is a man different from a woman? What is a man supposed to aspire to? And who are the role models we're putting out there? Who do you have in the culture, really, that is a heroic figure, a noble figure? We don't really even talk about nobility. We certainly don't talk about what it means to be a great man. We talk a lot about empowering women and that kind of stuff, but I think that young men especially are a little bit lost in terms of what's expected of them. And I said, this is wrong. We know it's wrong, but what can we do about it? And I think what we need to do at the very least, is talk about it, begin talking about it. In my introduction in the book, I talk about how we got here. But then I talk about, then I have 7 heroes, 7 great men. That's why the book is called 7 Men, who I think are God's idea of a great man. And I said one thing we need to do is get these stories of great men, real human beings who lived, out there so that people can begin, young men especially, but all of us can see this is a great man and what makes him great.
Now, Eric, in highlighting these 7 men, what do you see as the unifying factor here? What ties them all together? I mean, you have every one, and we'll run through some of them, from John Paul II to Bonhoeffer to Jackie Robinson. What ties them all together in your mind?
Aside from the fact that they're all men.
Yeah, well, aside from
nothing
that.
I can think of, Raymond. That's it. That's it. No. Actually, it's interesting because it's a pretty subjective list. I mean, there's so many others that I might have chosen. Why did I choose these 7 specifically? Each of them had, as part of his life, not only a faith, a deep faith, but there's a place in each of these lives, at least one, where he did something profoundly sacrificial, where he did something noble and heroic, where any sane person would say, no, 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 don't do that. You don't need to do that. And he said, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the right thing because it's the right thing, because God calls me to do the right thing. So really noble, sacrificial acts. I mean, you think of, in the case of Jackie Robinson, he gave up the right to fight back. Now, anybody would say, of course you have the right to fight back. I mean, people are going to be calling you these things and spiking you with their spikes and treating you like scum. You, as a man, you have the right to fight back. But he said, no, the Bible says, Jesus says, turn the other cheek and do not repay evil. And that I know that in order to accomplish this great effort to integrate baseball, this is going to take sacrifice on my part. I will do this for an untold young men who are going to follow me. I'm not going to get anything out of this, but I'm going to do it because it's a noble calling. And what he did was heroic. Most people don't know that Jackie Robinson was a profound Christian, a man of prayer who was on his knees every night asking God for strength. People don't know that. That doesn't really come out so much in the movie at all.
Yeah,
and,
you were very critical, I know,
people
of the
need to know the story.
42, because it sort of minimized the faith.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, I could talk on both sides of the issue. In other words, compared to a lot of Hollywood movies, okay, there's some faith in it. But compared to what it could have been, oh my goodness. I mean, think of Chariots of Fire. You know, it's rare that Hollywood gets it right and says that faith is at the heart of a man's noble sacrifice. In the case of Eric Liddell, another one of the men in my book, the subject of Chariots of Fire, what does he give up? Well, his great sacrifice is he says, I will not run on the Sabbath. In those days, as a Scotsman, as a Presbyterian, very dedicated to God. His parents were missionaries. He said, I will not run on the Sabbath. And, you know, most people said to him, are you crazy? You're going to win a gold medal. You are the odds-on favorite to win a gold medal. Scotland has never gotten a gold medal. It's the 1924 Olympics. Come on, Big God will overlook it. He said, no, I will not. He said, I'm going to honor God, and whoever honors God, God will honor him. I mean, you talk about faith, you talk about courage, and then you talk about sacrifice. I mean, it's not easy to give up a pretty much guaranteed gold medal. So that story is, of course, in the movie Chariots of Fire. The faith element in Chariots of Fire is pretty much at the forefront. In 42, they really minimize it. And in Amazing Grace, which was affiliated with my Wilberforce book, as good as that movie is, and it's a good movie, just like 42 is a good movie, but the faith element, it's not there. And I said, people really need to know the faith of these heroes. Wilberforce, same thing. In this chapter, I talk about his conversion and how his faith was the fire that led him to do what he did. Incredible sacrifice, a whole lifetime of sacrifice. So each of the men in this book really sacrificed something, and that's a very powerful thing to tell young people especially.
Now, Eric, as an evangelical author, some are saying it's a bit unorthodox, if you will, for you to highlight the life of Karol Wojtyła, Pope John Paul II. Why were you drawn to him, and what do you think he exemplifies? What does he have to teach men today?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it would be a crime and a sin not to put at least one Catholic in this book. I mean, I'm a huge fan, as you already know, otherwise you wouldn't have me here. I'm a huge fan of the Catholic Church. I am following in some ways in the footsteps of the seventh man in this book, Chuck Colson, who launched Evangelicals and Catholics Together with Father Richard John Newhouse.
Yeah.
I just was part of the Colson Center awarding the Wilberforce Award to Cardinal Timothy Dolan just a few days ago.
I saw that.
I have huge respect for the Catholic Church, and I believe with the HHS mandate and religious freedom that we have got to be linking arms and fighting together for religious freedom in America. So I'm an extremely pro-Catholic, non-Catholic, and I would say that you know, there's no way that you could not think of John Paul II as great. Now, each of the men in this book is a man, which means he's flawed. So you can say, well, he did this wrong, he did that wrong. That's fine. That's kind of the point, is that just because, you know, Jesus is not in this book, but there were men who have lived whom Jesus would tell us, look at that life, study that life, because there was someone who, with brokenness, was able to be great. And John Paul II is one of the greatest examples of a human being who had tremendous adversity. When you think of what he went through, losing his mother at an early age, losing his father at age 20, living through communism, they despised Christians, they despised the Catholic Church. He in the midst of this difficult situation, nobly clings to his faith and was a man of prayer. People don't know what a great athlete he was, what a genius he was, a playwright, a philosopher. This is a great man. And then at the end of his life, I think the one thing that I thought of that I wanted to tell more than anything was that here's a man at the end of his life who he gets Parkinson's. And he lives out what he was saying constantly, that we are not what we do. You could be in a vegetative state. You could be an embryo in the womb. You're created in the image of God. And so you have dignity because you're created in the image of God. And at the end of his life, when this incredible athlete was laid low by Parkinson's and could barely speak, he was a picture of what he had been preaching about. He practiced what he preached, and he spoke out against destroying embryos for stem cell research that, you know, they claimed could cure Parkinson's, and he had Parkinson's. He lived his faith in a public way, in a powerful way. And I put it in here. Also, I put him in here at the very least to let any evangelicals or Protestants know that that we need to celebrate our Catholic brothers and sisters. There are very few evangelicals in this day who are prejudiced in the way that they might have been 20 or 30 or 50 years ago. But in case there are any, I want them to know that I disagree with them.
Well, Eric, I want to share, there's a little quote that you mention in the book from Billy Graham, where he writes, I'm not a Roman Catholic. I certainly share some of the Protestant reservations about some aspects of Catholic doctrine. Yet, in my view, John Paul II, in his profound spiritual depth, is the greatest single Christian leader of the 20th century. Why do you think there are so few Christian leaders of any major stature today?
Well, my goodness, that's so hard. That's a big question. We'll have to talk about that when I'm in Washington with you. There's a lot to talk about. I don't know. I think in part, Raymond, that it gets to the point of this book. We need heroes, and we need to have examples, because courage is contagious. Faith is contagious. Manliness, God's idea of manliness. I'm not talking about machismo. I'm talking about God's idea of noble manhood. It's contagious. When you see it as a man, you want to be like that. And I think that the more people will step out in faith and be courageous figures, especially in public life, the easier it is for young men to aspire to that. And again, that's why I wrote this book. I said, we need to have examples. First of all, there are plenty of people who've never heard of some of these people in this book. And I said, you need to know who these people were. You need to know that faith was at the heart of what they did. And you need to know this is God's idea of what it is to be a man. And by the way, that's kind of the idea of manhood that we want to pick up. Not the debased idea of manhood that we're getting from the culture, which is either the false, you get two false choices, right? You either can be sort of a macho, chest-beating jackass, you know, sort of a ball-spiking, showboating, me narcissist, or you could be somebody, on the other hand, who's kind of, who says, well, there's really no difference between men and women, so I'm a metrosexual, I've transcended that. Well, according to Scripture, God created us male and female, and He did that for a purpose. He wants men to be men, but He wants them to be men in the sense that His idea of manhood, which is this nobility, strength used in the service of others. You know, these are ideas, as I said, they're not talked about in the culture. We're not getting a lot of examples of them, so I said we kind of need some, and I think that will lead others to want to be that way.
And these are sort of, I should just tell people, these are sort of cliff notes on these lives, and it focuses on the major crises that these men faced at their various moments in history, and how, via their faith and their inherent maleness, manliness, were able to overcome their times and the crisis they faced. It's not only, I think, informative and historically important, but it's inspirational, and it gives us something to shoot for. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our friend Chuck Colson. You mentioned early on, Father Richard John Newhouse and Chuck Colson launched Catholics and Evangelicals Together, that major effort which continues today. He, of course, the founder of Prison Fellowship, and had his own major conversion. I want to play a little clip of Chuck Colson. He appeared on the show with his daughter and talked about his grandson, Max, who is autistic and had a profound impact on his life. I'll play this for you. I want your reaction, Eric. Of course, you knew Chuck very well and worked with him. He was a mentor. Listen to this, Chuck Colson. How has he changed your view of people with disability and your own faith?
Well, I took people with disability for granted. I now realize that this is the sentinels on the front lines of the defense of life in our culture. Because when you look at people like this and say, they're of no use to society. No, they're of tremendous use. God will take things which we think are foolish and base, and he'll use them to shame the wise and the mighty. And he's done that with Max. He's done that repeatedly. And in my life, he's changed me completely, because I've learned something. Everybody's always had to play to my side, my interest, because I've always been the guy on top and rushing to the success. With Max, he's humbled me. I have to get down on the ground and reach him at his level. I have to get inside of him. It's been wonderful. But I've also seen, in the way Emily has sacrificially given her life, exactly what Jesus talks about when he says, if you really love one another, you'll give yourself for them. And you have to, this is agape love. It is self-denying and self-giving in its totality. And Max has the same thing. Max will love you unconditionally.
Your reaction, Eric?
Well, first of all, I'm going to get choked up hearing his voice. I love him so much. I miss him. He just died just a year ago. Just a few days ago, I was with his widow, Patty Colson, and with Emily, his daughter. We were together to give Cardinal Dolan the Wilberforce Award, so just a few days ago. But Chuck, you know, just what he said about self-sacrifice, that's the agape love of Jesus. That's the love of the New Testament. That's what it means to be a Christian, is to give of oneself. And I saw that in Chuck's life. I mean, he was a guy who, you know, he lived for himself until God humbled him through Watergate. He gives his life to Christ. Everything changes. He goes into prison, and he somehow makes the connection that it's about these people. It's about the least of these. It's about those who suffer, those who are incarcerated. It's about those with disabilities. That's what it is to be a Christian. Jesus was trying to get us to see that. And of course, it goes against our flesh. It goes against our sin nature. Chuck lived it. And his sacrifice, in the book, I tell the story where he was offered a plea bargain. Same kind of thing. Everybody with a brain said, you've got to take this. You'd be insane not to take the plea bargain. He said, no, I will not. I won't lie. I serve a God that says, thou shalt not lie. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say I did something to get a plea bargain to get out of going to jail. And a couple of other things he did. He also sacrificed the rest of his life. Most people say, don't go back to prison. Forget about it. Be like Martha Stewart. You know, just don't even think about it. Just march on. He said, no, I'm going to go back. I can't forget those men. Every one of the men in this book is a hero in that sense. And we need, a part of the reason I wrote this book, and I talk about this in the introduction, is that we need heroes, and we need a sense of the heroic, especially for young men. Young men are craving noble, heroic things to shoot for, some grand thing to shoot for, to live for. We're not really offering that in our culture, in our debased culture where people are playing video games. We need to give young men something great and heroic to shoot for. We need to give them heroes. Every one of the men in this book, George Washington all the way up to Chuck Colson, the last man in the book, are heroes. Chuck, by the way, I always like to say this. I told his widow and Emily the other day that when Chuck was on his deathbed, I said he's going to be the 7th man in this book. And he bumped Lincoln. Lincoln would have been in the book, but Chuck bumped him because he had, you know, there are no living people in the book. But I said when Chuck was passing away, well,
Yeah.
That's the last thing he needs to qualify, so he's in the book.
No, he was a great man, and so are you. Eric Mataxas, thanks so much for coming on the program. We'll talk to you soon. You can read Eric's columns at ericmetaxas.com, and his book, 7 Men and the Secret of Their Greatness, is out now from Thomas Nelson. It's available at bookstores everywhere and online at the usual outlets. Well, that is all the time we have. The show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. The Twitter and Facebook pages are linked on the left-hand side of the site. And be sure to sign up for my weekly e-blasts on the website as well. And it's all free. I'll keep you updated on the latest news as it breaks. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.